Well, good morning and welcome to the Daily Dose this Thursday morning as we get up to sunshine. It is a great day here. I don't know how it is where you are, but we are enjoying sunshine and a blue sky, and it's going to be a great day. I want to welcome you to the Daily Dose this morning. Thank you for joining us. I see you as you are signing in and logging in, so I appreciate you being with us. For those of you that may be joining us later, we do thank you. And if you want to share your comments, I usually check back sometime in the day to get those. Today on the broadcast, I have with us Dr. David Bowman. He is I'll have to get his exact title. I forgot to do that. I think it's Executive Director of the Tarrant Baptist Association. I'm going to get him to explain that to us here in just a second. But the topic of our day, and this is something I've been dealing with and mulling over, and I've spoken with other people in this same way, finding ourselves in COVID-19, because I think that this pandemic that we're dealing with has really caused us a great deal of heartache. I also believe that it has caused us a great deal of internal questioning. Our jobs changed, our life changed, everything was turned upside down, and now we don't know what to do, where to go, and we seem to have lost our identity and our purpose. And so today on the broadcast, I've brought David on with us because he is much more of an expert in this field than I could ever dream to be. So I've invited him to join with us. So David, welcome to the Daily Dose. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It's an honor.
So before we get going, tell us a little bit about yourself. We were talking about grandkids before we got live. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am married to Katie. Katie is the most awesome and amazing woman ever. She is the associate superintendent for Birdville School District. She takes care of finance and auxiliary operations. So anything that doesn't that deals with that's everything that doesn't deal with inside the classroom stuff. So buses, building and grounds, all the budget, all those kind of things. She manages hundreds of millions of dollars and makes it look easy. So she's pretty amazing. We have a son, Jonathan. He and his wife, Erica, and our granddaughter, Kennedy, live in Virginia right now. They'll be here in a couple of weeks on their way to California. He's a captain in the Marines. He's leaving Quantico and the Marine Corps base there and headed to the West Coast, where he's served a couple of different times before. He's taking command of his first unit out there. That'll be a big deal. And then we have a daughter, Paula, and her husband, Connor, who live here in Fort Worth. She's an assistant district attorney for Tarrant County. And then our son-in-law, Connor, is an engineer. We have an unofficially adopted daughter, Melissa, and her husband, Philip, and our grandson, Hudson, and their two dogs who are staying with us right now. Here it is at just after 8 o'clock, and everybody has left the house after a very noisy night. They got here late, and the dogs they were so excited that anytime they heard movement during the night, they barked. So if I look a little sleepy this morning, I am.
Right. That's right. That's right.
But that's my family.
Hey, as I stumbled a little bit over your positional title, when I grew up, and I think some of our listeners, when they grew up in Baptist life, we called it a director of missions. And now some of those terminologies have changed, especially in the larger associations. Your title is executive director of the Tarrant Baptist Association. That job may not be always understood by people. Could you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Yeah, so the job has been called Associational Missionary Director of Missions. 3 years ago, Southern Baptist did a big study, and they came up with a new name, Associational Mission Strategist, AMS. And I'm not sure
we
that
love
really
our
helped.
abbreviations.
I'm telling you, I'm not sure that really helps clarify anything. But we are 400 Southern Baptist churches in Tarrant County. That makes us about the third or fourth largest association in the country. We have more churches in our association than 21 state conventions. So it's a little different size and scale. I grew up in Northeast Texas, small associations, 40 to 60 or 70 churches. And in those days they said, well, the director of missions is a pastor to pastors. And I bought into that. Mm-hmm. But if you've got 400 of them, you're not. You can't be. It just doesn't work that way. That's more people than any one individual can take care of. And so we operate on a little different scale. We only do three things. Every church does at least three things: worship, and then small groups of some kind, and then different service things, service inside the church building, and then those things you do in the community: worship, connect, serve. So we as an association, we do leadership development, church starting, and community engagement. If it doesn't fit in one of those buckets, then it probably belongs on somebody else's plate. And we will assist them, we will serve them, we will resource them, but that's not our thing. So that's what we do in Tarrant County. We also have the privilege, because of the expertise of our staff and the kinds of training, the experience that we have, we're able to serve doing the things we do here around the world. We were involved in Venezuela for 10 years before the government there said no Americans can come into our country anymore. But we had an amazing work there, and the fruit of that is, as hard as it is in Venezuela, the churches are thriving. And that's a good thing. We're working next door in Peru. Gary Kroll on our staff, our CFO, was an IMB missionary in Peru for 19 years. And he and Hector Mendez, who was on our staff for a number of years and still very engaged with us, is pastor of Iglesia Bautista Central in Fort Worth. They have been training pastors there for, I think they're in their third year. They've got another year, and then they will turn that over to them. And so the seminary in Peru and the seminary in Venezuela both use the training that we provided to be the spiritual formation piece for all of their students. And the president and one of the other key officers there at the seminary in Peru have been going through our process. They'll be some of the leaders in the years ahead. We're also doing that in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, working with church planters and pastors there. It's a beautiful city. It's an amazing city. It's a city of immigrants. It's the largest Chinese city outside of China in the world. It's the largest Indian city outside of India in the world. It is a city of immigrants of 4.5 million people. Only about a third of them, I think it is, actually were born there. They migrated there. They're first or second generation kinds of folks. So we work there. We're getting ready to work in Detroit, which is a truly struggling city. We're getting ready to go to work doing the same kinds of things in Wales, over in England. So God has opened up some amazing doors for us, not just for our staff to do these things, but to train pastors and to take them to lead those kinds of ministries. So we're investing deeply in leaders who are raising up other leaders, disciples who are making disciples. That almost sounds biblical, I know.
Right. When we talk about when we talk about this sense of identity and talking about trying to find out who we are, the old joke is I need to take a year and backpack through Europe, to find myself. Yep. That was the thing that was happening before I came of age and things like that. In some of the emails that we've exchanged, I noticed a tagline that I'm wondering if it came from some of this discovery process and training that you have as well. I've noticed on some of the emails a tagline under your name that says "maximize your story." Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, my life mission, my life call is I help people experience maximum expression of their life stories. I believe every one of us has a story. If you and I sat down for the first time across the table at lunch, and I said, "Tell me your story," you would tell me the things that are most important to you about your story. And everybody has a story. A lot of times those stories go untold. And the thing is, all of us carry this story within us of who we think we could be if somebody just gave us permission or the opportunity or maybe some resources. We have this story. Well, my story is that I help people experience maximum expression of their story. I want everyone not to live the life of their dreams, but to live the lives of God's dreams for them. What God has in store for us is a whole lot better than anything we could dream of. I mean, if you think about Ephesians 3:20, where it talks about these things that God is more than anything we can imagine, conceive of, dream up, all this. That just goes right along with what it says in Ephesians chapter 2, where, he says, we're saved by grace through faith. This is not of ourselves. This is totally God's doing, not anything we can add to the equation, not anything we can do to earn it or deserve it. And then verse 10, same context, same paragraph. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. God has been having this dream about our lives for all eternity. The eternally present one has known us from before time began. He knew everything that we were to be. He knows all of our capacities, and he wants us to live into the full expression of that. So when I say maximum expression, that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about maximize your story, I want you to live the life of God's dreams for you.
Well, I can really feel your passion. You are, and I've been around you enough to know that's really your heart. You're very interested in others, and you're interested in helping everybody find their way and to find their story. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the broadcast and help our people, because I think that coming out of COVID-19, who we were going into it, I think we might be different coming out of it. And if we're not different, we're in a state of question. Who am I now? Now that my job has changed, now that maybe I'm permanently remote working, now that all these other things have changed, who am I now? What am I supposed to do now?
Let me say something about that. Yeah. If you went into this season and you knew your life core, your life call,
right.
You knew what God had called you to be and to do, and you could name that. Right. And I honestly believe that every single one of us can not only know God's mission for our lives, but we can name it. And we can summarize it in 2 words, like maximizing expression. But if you knew that going into this, and you knew your core 4 values, those values that stood out above and beyond everything else, those values that guide your decision making. Mm-hmm. If you went into this season with those things in place, you're going to come out in the same place. What changes is then those steps, that strategy, because we have a new strategy for how we get things done. And it might even be better than what we were doing before. We're learning some things right now that we're wondering, gee, why didn't I give attention to this before now, right?
Exactly.
And our scoreboard up there, that has changed a little bit. But who I am at my essence, how I make my decision making, how I make my decisions, those things that guide me at the deepest level, that has not changed at all. It's just a matter of how I do what I do and what the results look like.
And that's true. My fear sometimes and experience, I think you'd agree with me. So many of us didn't know what those things really were going in. And so a crisis moment like this causes what Blackaby used to call a crisis of belief, a crisis of faith. And now we're having to go back and say, okay, maybe what I have identified with all of these years isn't really who I am at the core. And maybe it's not what I truly value. And so we need to help our people. I'm finding that I want to help our people find out, okay, let's get back to what are you really at your core? What is it that God's call has upon your life that maybe now through this crisis, you've realized you've been following the wrong thing, or maybe you've been vocationally doing the wrong thing. But I agree that if you went in knowing it, well, it's not going to change on the other side. Our God doesn't change. But so often we don't know. And these crises allow us, I think, and challenge us to know these things better.
Absolutely.
Well, I noticed on your shirt and also on this book by Will Mancini. It's called Unique, and this is something that you are very familiar with. It's something you're trained in. You lead others in. You've led us as an association in, So how did you get involved in this?
Well, let me give you the long story short version. I've been doing Church Unique with Will Mancini for a long time, since about 2010. I started doing that when I worked for Texas Baptist. The book came out in 2008. I met Will that fall, and we got to know each other and started talking about learning his process and everything. And I think I bugged him enough that he finally allowed me to be on the team. But there's a long story that goes with that. But after reading this book for a while, I thought, dude, this would be really good if we applied it to our personal lives. And so our staff, who are all trained in Church Unique, we started developing a process for a person's individual life based on Church Unique. So I went to some training with the Oxano team, the parent company of Church Unique, in Nashville at Lifeway. And I sat down at dinner one night with Will, and I said, listen, let me tell you what we're doing as a staff. And he laughed, and he said, well, I'm working on this other project right now, but next I'm going to be working on that. And the story is the very first time Will led what is now called Church Unique, the pastor called him aside during one of the breaks and said, I need something like this for my personal life. So this is, that was back around the year 2000. In 2015, Dave Rhodes from 100 Movements and 3DM, both major disciple making organizations, training organizations, they started putting this process together. And soon after that, we began test marking it. Because of my interest in this, Will included me from there at the start. And so since 2015, 2016, we've been developing this toolkit. In fact, if you look real closely, you might actually see some of my stuff in that book, Unique. We've been test marketing that. We've been rolling it out. And just in January, that book, Unique, came out. Yes. I was in on the editing process of that. And it took 2 full years to get that book to publication. But we wanted to iron out the bugs in the system before we finalized the book. So I've been a part of that from the beginning. But there are a lot of books. I've read probably 10, and there's probably another 10 on my to-read list on life planning books out there. A lot of good ones. But there is only one that actually has tools in it that helps you do this. I mean, you could take Unique and do this for yourself with the tools that are included in the book. Now, I think it's better with a guide, somebody who's been there and done that. There's great value in having a coach who can help you with that. But you can do it yourself, just taking the book and reading it. None of the other books, I'm not denigrating any of those books. There are a lot of good stuff out there. But none of those other books have any tools to help you with that. And one of
every chapter in the book has some tools. As I read through it, it's reasons why you should keep reading, and do this right now and think through
Yep.
this right now. And it really makes it available to anybody who wants to go through it.
Yeah, and many books will end the chapter with 3, 4, 5, 10 questions. Nobody ever reads. I mean, you might glance over those, but you're not going to spend an hour or two of your life working through those questions. Nobody does that. But we give you tools. Will Mancini's bias is if you can't draw it, you can't explain it. And
that comes from his wife, the artist.
That's right. She's amazing. She's got world-class art. And so, like back here, I've got this tool, and I use that to explain some things. So we've got a whole set of constructs for each one of the processes that we lead because, if you can see it, you can conceive it a whole lot better. You can see how it applies to your life better.
Well, let's talk about a couple of things in the book. Because the first one I'm going to bring up sounds a little different. It's not the normal construct that I think I grew up with in church. I mean, as I was growing up, the discipleship model was just be like Jesus. And one of the things that he says early on in the book is stop trying to be just like Jesus, but let the Holy Spirit guide you in becoming the you that you were designed to be. Now, unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, one of my favorite books is The Me I Want to Be, John Ortberg.
John Ortberg. Mm-hmm.
And read anything that he writes. And Becky and I, particularly Becky on our staff, and somebody was just mentioning Becky a minute ago in the chat. Becky gives away a lot of John Ortberg books, and we use a couple of those books in the trainings that we do. But I don't want to be so much like Jesus because I can't be. I'm not divine. I'm never going to be God. That's not going to happen. And I can do the same things he does, but I don't have chapter and verse for every single thing. The question becomes, as Dallas Willard would put it, not what Jesus do, but what would Jesus do if he were you in this situation? So we have to live in that moment by moment reality of knowing and experiencing God, being so in tune with the Spirit that we know what to do. Now, we don't know all those things. We're going to fail. We're going to fall short, but we serve a God of grace who picks us up and helps us start over again more intelligently. I love what Dallas Willard says when he talks about getting beyond this idea of sin management and being afraid to make a mistake. There are some things where God gives us really clear guidance, and there's some things it's kind of like a parent with a child. Well, let's see what the kid does. And then the lesson will come later. We'll talk about the failure or whatever later. But more important than what would Jesus do is, what would Jesus do if he were a 58-year-old Anglo in my position at this time in this place? What would he do? And that's more important to me than wearing a band that says WWJD.
Now, if it was WWJD, if he were me, then that might be.
Yeah. I mean, people are going to hear about Jesus, but they want to see Jesus, and we need to let our lives demonstrate not just what Jesus would do, but they need to hear him through us. They need to experience him through us. My wife yesterday ran into a really, really, really cranky individual in a professional context, a person who never made eye contact with her, a person who yelled at her in a professional context where that woman who was supposed to be serving my wife kept it together, never lost her cool, which is pretty good for her because, she can be a lioness. She's pretty tough. She can hold her on, but she demonstrated the face of grace to somebody who did not deserve it. I thought that was just pretty amazing hearing her tell that story, because I know what she was really feeling.
Right. we're coming through this time in our world today, before COVID and now even after COVID. There's 1,000 things that I can do.
Mhm.
I mean, I get to the office every day. There's 1,000 things I can do. When I look at ministry, there's 1,000 things I can do. I think with all of us, when we look at the options that lie before us today, there's 1,000 things I can do. One of the things that the book suggests is that I need to find the one thing that I must do. And I think this centers in some passion. What am I passionate about? But how do I find this must do? How do I find that?
Yeah, one of the illustrations that is used in the book, and we use funnels a lot, and the professor at Dallas Seminary would draw that funnel. He'd draw 5 X's at the top of it, and representing all the things you could do, and then 1 X at the bottom, the one thing you must do. And so how do you clarify that? Well, passions, that's one thing. And there are a lot of books out there that says find and follow your passion. Well, that's awesome. That's part of it, but that's only about 1/3 of it. There's also, what has God equipped you to do? I mean, what are your talents? What are your abilities? What are your spiritual gifts? All of those things. That's another 1/3. The final 1/3 is context. So where do you serve best? What kind of team do you work best on? That kind of thing. I mean, are you better in a big organization, small organization, small team, a platoon size thing, or maybe working solo? A lot of us are working at home by ourselves these days, and some of us are loving it. And some of us are just dying for personal contact, right? I mean, I was sitting here one day. I'm a borderline introvert, so I'm digging this working from home thing.
Right.
I'm having a good time.
You could do this all day.
I could. And then one day I was sitting here and I thought, dude, I miss Becky and Gary and Troy and Cynthia and Kate, and I can't wait to get back with those guys. But what is your context? So passions, abilities, and context. When you pull those 3 things together, then you can begin to get a better idea of your one thing. And we have a process that we take you through to sort through, filter through those things, and you'll come out with your one thing, which mine is maximizing expression. Those, my 2 words, represent my one thing. And those 2 words, then we expand into 6, and then we expand that into 12, and that becomes our life call. This is my personal mission statement. And when you get clarity on that, that makes all the difference in the world. You know what to say yes to, what to say no to. It's truly liberating.
When we talk about things like life core, life call, life values, for some that might be listening, that has a lot of psychology sounding things, some therapy sounding things. How do we differentiate that? Or how would you explain that to those that may be looking at that going, hey, that just sounds like stuff, that sounds like psychobabble. So how do you help us understand that?
Well, all truth is God's truth, for one thing. And if psychology can teach us something, let's learn it.
Exactly.
I remember my very first psychology class. I didn't go to Baptist school. I couldn't afford any of those. But in my very first psychology class, very first day, the professor says, if you believe in any kind of supreme being, this class is a waste of time for you. And I thought, easy A. All I got to do is regurgitate what this guy says. I don't have to believe a word of it. Thank you very much. But I did find out there are a lot of good insights in psychology. There's a lot of truth in psychology, and there's some great Christian psychologists, and we can learn from them. But this is not psychobabble. The Bible talks a lot about values, doesn't it?
Right. Yes.
We see values on display everywhere. When you understand what a value is, when it is more than just a core conviction, but it's how you filter your decision making, then you begin to understand values better. Let me give you an exercise. If I gave you a check and I could cover it for $1.5 million, what would you do with it? Now, what you would do with it tells me a lot about your values. Now, first of all, I want you to understand what I just said. I'm going to give you a check for $1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do with it? I didn't say how would you spend it, but there were some people who heard that question. Their first idea was, this is how I will spend it. Right. There's some other people who heard that and they said, here's how I will save it. There are others who heard that and said, this is how I will invest it. And there's a whole range there. And whatever you would do with $1.5 million is based on your values. The car that you drive is based on your values. The clothes that you wear, based on your values. On and on. Once you begin to understand values as more than core convictions, but as filters for daily decision making, then you begin to see this is not psychobabble. This is truth. This is reality.
Absolutely.
And every one of us, think about it. When I work with churches and we isolate their core values, the reality is almost every church shares the same values. If you took the top 20 or 25,
mm-hmm.
we'd all have those. But it's the ones that rise to the top 4 or 5 or 6 that truly differentiate one congregation from another. So you could have 4 churches at the same intersection, one on each corner, and they could all be Baptist churches. And I can take you to a place like that, by the way. They're very different churches in part because they have different values, core values, and those values rise to the top. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, as we begin to look at post-pandemic and getting back to whatever the new normal may be, this crisis has created a lot of discussion about personal identity, our purpose. We've been challenged in so many ways. And I think as we started off the broadcast, those that understood their calling from God going into it have not been shaken nearly as much as those that may not have understood God's calling upon their life mm-hmm. as they entered it. So with jobs and schools adjusting so dramatically these past few weeks, how can we discover this identity and purpose that God has for us as we have our time right now to do so?
Yeah, so while you're alone, I would get that book Unique and read that. You can get that as a Kindle version or as a hardback. That's a great starting place. We are currently doing a Unique cohort. This is a closed group, as you would imagine. This is the kind of thing where you need to be there week after week after week. 10 o'clock this morning, I'll be leading our group as we continue through this process. We at Tarrant Baptist Association do this in several different ways. We lead it in several different ways. I do life planning, and it's a 2-day one-on-one process. Becky Beiser also does that on our staff. So if you'd prefer, ladies, if you'd prefer to work with Becky on that, then you could do that. And so that's 2 days where we do a deep dive into your life and we work through the process. Now, obviously, you can't get through everything in that book in 2 days, but we give you the core of the process. So we do it that way. We can also do it virtually. Well, we've learned a lot of things that we can do by this kind of technology over the last couple of months. And so we can do it like that as well. I'm doing a Church Unique process virtually right now. I've never done that before. It's going great. But we can do that. We can do that live and in person. We have what we call accelerators, where in 4 days, we'll take you through the whole process, and then we'll take the next 90 days and help you really unpack that. We also do, like we're doing right now, weekly meetings where we work on one construct, one process every week for 26 weeks and get through the process like that. So there are a number of different ways that we can do it. We have, as soon as we can get back to retreat season, we want to help Riverbend recover. As you know, losing summer camps, that's a $1 million loss. How do you sustain something like that? And Riverbend's doing a great job Brad Lambert, the executive director there, and his staff, they are doing an amazing job adjusting to the current reality. But we want to help them recover. So as soon as they're able to host us, we're going to do a unique primer retreat. And it's 6 tools from the process. We'll start one evening. We'll finish the next afternoon. And we'll walk you through that. We'll give you a thorough introduction to the process. And you can decide if it's worth your time and investment. There is a financial investment that goes with it because it does, it's a cost item for us. And we just pass those costs along. We don't make a whole lot of money off of this process. Trust me. That's not why we do it. We want to grow disciples who make disciples, who raise up leaders, all those kinds of things. So, we have a number of different ways, and we're at 10 o'clock this morning, meeting with the Unique core team, and we are creating some standalone courses that you can do in an hour, give you a good introduction, give you something that's going to be of significant value for you. One of the parts of the process, we'll be doing those, and so we'll be offering those as well. But the big thing is get in touch with Becky or with me. And we would love to have you part of one of those processes. Just email us and say you're interested. We'll follow up. We'll figure out which one of those fits best for you. And we'll help you get that personal clarity of knowing who God designed you to be, what your core values are, what your life steps are, and what your life score is, how to know when you're winning at life.
David, thank you for that. Thank you for being with us on the broadcast today. This is a topic that could easily span 2 or 3 different sessions as well. But I appreciate just giving us some insight in some of these things and a beginner to get us started. We have time on our hands, and to make good use of that time certainly would be to find out what God's call is on our life. So thank you again for being with us. Thank you all for being with us on the Daily Dose today. I pray that God's blessings be upon you this day as we continue on through our week. Join us for online worship Sunday at 11. If you don't have a church home, fbccrowley.org. We would love to have you join us online. And you guys have a great day and a great weekend, and we'll see you this weekend.